Welcome to Nightfall Travels. I'm glad you're here. Settle in wherever you are, let the sounds around you soften, and let your breathing find an easy rhythm. Imagine a dim shoreline at dusk, waves arriving without hurry, the horizon a cool ribbon of blue. Tonight we stay close to home, grounded on Earth, moving at the unhurried pace of the planet itself. This world is generous with quiet wonders, the kind that ask for nothing more than your attention. We'll drift through a few of them together, with a calm gaze and an easy mind. And while you settle in, if we're live, feel free to share in the chat where you're listening from and what time it is there. Across the world, others are beginning their own journey with Nightfall Travels, and for a moment, we share this stillness together. Begin with the idea that time on Earth does not always run in a straight line. Near the Mediterranean coast and in warm seas around the world, a small glassy jelly drifts in the water column as if suspended between moments. Turritopsis dohrnii, often called the immortal jellyfish, is an animal that can move backward through its own life cycle. When stressed by injury, sudden temperature change, or scarcity, its adult body can reverse course and return to the earlier polyp stage, the soft, rooted form that begins life on a hard surface. From there, it can bud new medusae and start again. In careful laboratory observations, researchers have watched this reversal play out more than once, seeing adult tissue reorganize into a youthful plan, as if a butterfly decided to fold itself back into a caterpillar and then try again on a calmer day. It isn't invincible. It can be eaten or torn by currents, and most of them live ordinary, finite lives. But the capacity is there, a built-in loop that lets a fragile body rewrite its place along the circle of time. You don't have to push the image too far. Just picture a small bell of tissue rising and falling with the tide, refusing a single ending, holding the possibility of another beginning. The jellyfish's quiet loop is a reminder that life on Earth often prefers cycles to straight lines. Walk with that thought into the stillness of a forest. It can feel like a collection of separate beings, trunks, leaves, needles, bark, but under the leaf litter is a network that changes the picture. Delicate fungal threads known as mycorrhizae thread the soil, reaching from root to root in branching paths finer than a human hair. Through these filaments, trees exchange sugars, mineral nutrients, water, and chemical signals. What seems like a single oak or fir is part of a neighborhood pantry with many doors. Older mother trees, with canopies that pull in steady sunlight, can funnel carbon-rich sugars to saplings below. Fungi trade in the opposite direction, delivering phosphorus and nitrogen gathered from distances the plant's own roots cannot comfortably reach. When pests bite, when drought dries the duff, a tree can send warning compounds into the shared web, and neighbors may respond by adjusting their own defenses. It isn't a conversation in the way we speak, and it isn't consciousness, but it is coordination, and it is constant.
If you hold a pinch of forest soil, you hold a crowded city. Hyphae, the thin threads that make this network, run through it like quiet streets. A single pinch can contain meters of these threads, weaving between grains of sand and tiny pockets of air. The exchange is simple to picture. Sugars traveling outward from a sunlit canopy into the dim underground. Minerals traveling inward from far-reaching filaments toward leaves and needles. Imagine a long table where each place setting is linked to the next by a soft cord. Pull at one and another moves, not as a trick, but because that is how the table was set from the start. In that design, there is generosity and there is cost, and the forest balances both, day after day, season after season. It is not a metaphor to call it a network. It is a network, and it changes how a grove survives wind, heat, and time. The rhythm of this exchange can be soothing to consider. Water rises through xylem as dawn warms the canopy, and sugars descend as evening cools the air. Underground, moisture beads on the surfaces of tiny rooms where roots and fungi meet. The tree offers carbon it built from light. The fungus offers the gathered minerals of stone. If a neighboring birch thrives in spring, while a fir struggles in shade, the balance of who gives and who receives shifts. If drought arise, older roots can reach through the web to the youngest ones and keep them from failing. Think of it as a quiet ledger that updates itself without numbers, always aiming for the steady center that keeps the whole alive. Back along the shore, waves continue to fold and unfold, and the jellyfish is still there in the mind's eye, pulse after pulse. A creature that can step back toward its beginning lives by means of a loop. A forest that shares beneath the soil persists by means of a loop. One uses time as its circle, the other uses space. In both, what looks like a single life is supported by a pattern that isn't obvious at first glance. The ocean holds a small bell of tissue with the option to reset. The forest holds a woven map that helps many recover from strain. Taken together, they make a calming idea. On Earth, renewal is not an exception. It is one of the ordinary shapes that life prefers. If you want a scale to hold as you relax, keep two images gently balanced. In one, a jelly not much larger than a fingertip drifts near the moonlit surface, its bell a clear window, its tentacles a soft fringe, its cells quietly deciding to return to an earlier arrangement and try again. In the other, the unseen threads below a stand of trees stretch from trunk to trunk like fine lace, carrying carbon and water the way a slow stream carries light, never with a rush, always with enough. There's no need to choose one over the other. The planet has room for both forms of patience, the reset and the share, and for many more we'll visit as the night goes on. As you breathe, you can let these processes set the pace. Inhale for the ocean's pulse, exhale for the forest's flow. No drama is required, no extra meaning. The comfort is in the facts themselves, calm and sufficient. A jellyfish can step back into youth when the water grows rough. A tree can send sugars to a shaded neighbor through the work of a fungus that asks and receives a fair return. Life on Earth is practiced at this, at finding ways to keep going, to redistribute energy, to begin again without fuss. It is simple where it can be and intricate where it must be, and much of it happens quietly with no audience. Tonight, you are the listener, and listening is enough. Here at Nightfall Travels, we linger with this kind of quiet. We'll continue from shore to grove, from leaf to tide, keeping the tone steady and the steps small. For now, let the waves in your mind rise and fall once more, and let the ground beneath the imagined trees feel firm and cool. The world is not in a hurry. You don't need to be either. When you're ready, we'll turn the page gently and carry on.
Settle a little deeper and imagine a single droplet resting on a microscope slide, a round world complete with reflections of the room's light. Inside that small globe lives a creature that looks like a tiny, wrinkled bear with 8 soft legs and a patient expression. The tardigrade, often called a water bear, spends its life on films of moisture that coat moss and lichen, in the thin spaces between grains of soil, and in quiet pools that evaporate and return with the weather. In the calm rhythm of its days, it ambles, feeds, and carries on. But when conditions turn harsh, when water vanishes, when salt rises, when cold or heat presses too hard, it can do something quietly astonishing. It pauses itself. The way it pauses has a name: cryptobiosis. In that state, the tardigrade pulls in its legs, folds its body into a compact shape called a tun, and dries itself almost completely. The shift is gradual and unhurried, like settling into a winter sleep that is deeper than sleep. Inside this protective form, its metabolism drops to a near halt. It is not dead, it is waiting. Sugars such as trehalose accumulate and acts like gentle braces, holding delicate structures in place, while special protective proteins help keep membranes and molecules from collapsing as water leaves. The tun is so dense and spare that it can brush off extremes that would destroy most life. Cold, close to absolute zero, heat that would scald, pressures that crush, radiation that tears at bonds, and even the vacuum of space. In one set of experiments, tardigrades were sent beyond the atmosphere and returned. Reintroduced to water, many simply woke and moved on as if a long, silent moment had passed. The return is simple to picture. A dry speck receives a thin film of moisture. The tun rehydrates, cell parts relax into their ordinary places. The little legs extend, the body unfurls, and motion resumes at a mild walking pace. A short lifetime becomes a sequence of pauses and continuations, as if time itself is something the animal can set aside for later. It does not do this for adventure. It does it because its world is made of edges. Edges where puddles end. Edges where frost begins. Edges where salt rises from the soil in a dry breeze. Cryptobiosis is how a soft body stays intact at those edges without breaking. If you hold the picture of this tiny traveler, keep the scale close. A tardigrade is less than a millimeter long, small enough that an eyelash would make a generous bridge. On that scale, the thin sheen of dew on a blade of grass is a lake, and a shallow fold in a leaf is a valley. The resilience feels oversized for such a small form, and yet it matches the delicacy of the places it lives. Not everything in nature is built to endure by strength alone. Some endure by stepping aside until the moment is kinder.
Now let your attention drift from the small to the vast, from the quiet pause of a single animal to a change that touched the whole planet. Today, air feels simple to breathe. You draw it in without thought and release it again, and the cycle steadies itself. But long ago, Earth's atmosphere was almost entirely free of oxygen. The first communities of life, microbes that thrived without it, filled oceans that were comfortable for them and unmarked by the blue clarity we know. Then, very slowly, another kind of microbe made a different bargain with light. Cyanobacteria learned to use sunlight to split water and fix carbon, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. At first, that oxygen did not reach the air. It reacted with iron in the oceans and settled into rocks as bands of rust-red stone. For a long time, the oceans themselves were the sink, taking the new gas into the chemistry of minerals. As the stonework of the seabed filled its capacity, oxygen began to accumulate in the water, and then the sky. The shift was not an event you could watch in a single lifetime. It unfolded over hundreds of millions of years, a patient tipping of balances as sunlit microbes continued their work. For many of the anaerobic organisms of that early Earth, oxygen was not a gift. It was a reactive irritant that disrupted the metabolisms they relied on. Population shrank, niches closed. Some retreated to places still free of oxygen, deep sediments, hot vents, tight pockets and rocks, while others faded from the record. This period carries a large name, the Great Oxidation, and it marks a boundary between two atmospheric moods. What followed from this invisible gas is the quiet thread that runs through your own breath. In the presence of oxygen, a different way to harvest energy from food became common, one that yields more usable energy per unit of carbon. Over time, the bodies that used it could afford to be more complex. Cells partnered with other cells. Membranes grew elaborate, and communities of cells began building tissues that could support larger plants. Much later, under skies held in place by an ozone layer that formed from oxygen in the air and shielded the surface from harsh ultraviolet light, life stirred on land and learned new ways to grow. The details are many, and they took unimaginable time, but the outline is gentle enough to hold. A gas that once acted like a toxin slowly became a tool, and the energy it made available sponsored experiments that eventually included the one that lets you listen tonight.
Take a moment with the scale again. Tardigrades pausing in the folds of a moss leaf. Cyanobacteria spreading sunlight's harvest across a sea. Iron settling into stripes on the ocean floor. The first breaths in air dense with unfamiliar chemistry. The connection between them is not a direct line, but a shared patience. Resilience at the smallest scale can be enacted in days and weeks. Resilience at the largest can take billions of years. Both are real. Both are part of Earth's unhurried practice of making and remaking its living patterns. If you want an image to rest with, let it be this. A single dewdrop at dawn holds a water bear in its brief shining world, and the first angle of sunlight that touches it is a continuation of the same light that once helped fill the air with the breath you now take. Inhale and feel how easy oxygen makes the moment. Exhale and feel the body's steady trust in a cycle that has been in motion longer than mountains have stood. In a quiet sense, your breath is a museum of time. It contains an ancient problem that became the solution you use every few seconds without deliberation. Here at Nightfall Travels, we move slowly across scales because both offer rest. It is calming to know that a small animal can fold itself into safety and return when the world turns soft again. It is calming to know that a planet once inhospitable to your kind of breath took its time and changed, and that life learned to meet the new air with new ways of being alive. The facts don't ask for anything from you. They simply make a comfortable seat in the mind. If thoughts try to hurry, let them match the tardigrade's pace. A few unhurried steps and a pause. If worries try to fill the air, let them thin like the iron-clouded oceans clearing, one slow reaction at a time. We will keep this measure as we go, visiting places where life has made itself at home through patience, loops,
and careful exchanges. For now, let the droplet roll back into the moss. Let the old seas rust and settle far below, and let your breathing remain simple and kind. The night is long enough. There is no need to rush through it.
Set your mind on a warm afternoon clearing and let the light filter softly through green. Plants often seem patient and still, but some are careful hunters that turn waiting into a quiet strategy. In sunlit bogs of the Carolinas, the Venus flytrap holds its leaves open like small hinged shells, each lined with fine trigger hairs. An insect lands, touches one hair, and nothing happens. Touch a second hair, or the same hair twice within a short window, and the trap closes with a quick, certain motion. The counting matters. By requiring more than one touch, the plant avoids wasting effort on rain, drifting seeds, or a breeze. That frugal habit is practical, because closing costs energy. The trap will only reseal and digest if a few more gentle taps confirm that a living meal is inside. It is not a thought, but a timing and threshold system written into living tissue, the plant's subtle way of ensuring that its rare movements are worthwhile. Elsewhere, pitcher plants take a slower path to the same need. Their leaves are shaped into tall, smooth cups that smell faintly sweet. Visitors slide toward a cool at the bottom lined with enzymes and helpful microbes, a quiet chemistry set that turns hard-to-find nutrients into a form the plant can use. Sundews stretch out glistening tentacles tipped with sticky droplets. When a small body touches one, neighboring tentacles bend in, and the leaf slowly folds, as deliberate as a careful hand. All of these carnivorous habits grow in places where the soil is poor in nitrogen or phosphorus. The sun gives energy freely, but the ground does not. So the plants meet the rest of the budget by catching what the wind brings. Their patience is not passivity. It is an adaptation to thin margins, a calm way to make a meal from the air. Look closely at a single leaf, whether it feeds on sunlight alone or supplements with prey, and the precision is soothing. A leaf is soft to the touch, yet built like a small landscape. Veins spread from the stem in branching paths that reach the edges the way rivers spread across a watershed. Those veins carry water and minerals in, sugars out, and the spacing keeps every cell close to supply and return. On the surface, tiny valves called stomata open and close through the day, letting carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. The rhythm is a balance. Open too wide and water escapes into the air. Close too long and the machinery of photosynthesis slows. The leaf measures light, temperature, and humidity with biochemical senses and quietly adjusts the gates sip by sip. In some plants, the lamina even tracks the sun across the sky so that light arrives at a steady angle, the way you might turn a page toward a lamp to keep the print easy to read.
Inside, the green pigment chlorophyll holds the task together, catching packets of light and channeling their energy into bonds the plant can keep. Sugars made here travel down toward roots, out toward fruits, and across to neighbors in communities that share. If you hold a leaf up to the sun, you can sometimes see the major veins as pale threads, the large thoroughfares that narrow into lanes. The smallest veins are too fine to pick out with the eye, but they are there, finishing the map so thoroughly that no cell sits far from a path. In their branching pattern, you can trace the same order you see in river deltas and cracks in dry mud, repeating shapes that fill space neatly, a calm geometry that plants and landscapes both find useful. This balanced design is as much about protection as it is about gathering light. The cuticle, a thin, waxy covering, slows water loss without blocking the sun. Some surfaces shed raindrops so swiftly that beads roll away, taking dust with them. Others hold a thin film of moisture that helps a plant keep cool. A leaf can be a small collector, a shield, and a communicator all at once. When conditions are comfortable, stomata open like quiet doors to the day. When heat presses and the air grows dry, the doors narrow to conserve what the roots drew up at dawn. That unhurried management happens without pause, and it continues through seasons the way your lungs manage air moment by moment, while your thoughts wander elsewhere.
As the sun lowers, imagine following a path from forest edge to shore. The warmth slips from green to blue, and the breeze turns salt-sweet. Night deepens, and waves rise with a gentle glow, a thin line of light at each break. The ocean is not reflecting a lamp, it is shining from within. Along certain coasts, on quiet nights in places like Mosquito Bay in Puerto Rico or in sheltered lagoons of the Maldives, tiny plankton drift in the surface waters and light up when stirred. Their brightness is a simple chemistry, molecules meeting an enzyme and releasing their energy as a cold blue-green flash. A hand dipped, a fish turning, the small crest of a wave, each movement touches the switch, and the dark glitters for a heartbeat. The glow helps in different ways depending on the lineage, startling a predator, drawing a mate, masking a body against the dim sky above. It is not one story, but many converging on the same solution, a lamp lit briefly to make the night more navigable. You can walk the sand and test the water with your toes. Watch each step draw a meek comet's tail. The scale is modest, the beauty certain. In the deep sea, where sunlight never comes at all, this same way of making light is more common than not. Here at the shore, it feels like a gift taken out for a few minutes when the tide, the moon, and the tiny drifting lives all agree. There's no need to name the molecules or the pathways unless you feel like it. The easy truth is enough. Energy from food becomes light for a moment and then returns to the sea as thoughtless as a blink.
Let the shore and leaf occupy the same quiet in your mind. A leaf gathers day and spends it with care. A shallow wave gathers darkness and writes a line of light along its edge. The count of touches on a fly trap, the slow fold of a sundew, the measured opening of stomata, each is a small act of budgeting. The glowing bay is a different ledger, where the cost of light is paid only when motion makes it useful. Even the pitcher's patient cup, filled with rain and a few visiting enzymes, reads as a kind of accounting in a place where soil is thin. None of this seeks attention, and yet all of it rewards a careful look. In each case, the design matches the need, and the need is met without haste. As you settle with these pictures, notice how they share a gentle pace. The plant counts to 2 before it moves. The leaf opens and closes by fractions as the air shifts. The sea waits for a footfall or a fish's turn and answers with a single soft spark. If the day has been loud, this is a good measure to adopt. Inhale with the thought of stomata opening for light. Exhale with the glow fading back into dark water. That is enough to invite rest. Nightfall travels lingers in these unhurried places because they are generous with quiet. We will keep close to them as we go, visiting other corners where attention,
not effort, reveals how living things meet their days. For now, allow the imagined bay to dim, the leaf to lie still, and the insect-hunting plants to wait with their clean patience. The world keeps its own calm pace, and you can let yours match it.
If you sit very still and listen inward, you might notice that quiet isn't empty at all. Your body carries on with unhurried work you never need to supervise. Digestion continues, warmth settles into muscles, and the breath repeats its simple pattern. Beneath all of this, an entire community tends to you. Trillions of microscopic residents, bacteria, archaea, fungi, and their viral companions live across your skin, along your airways, and deep within your gut. Together, they are your microbiome, a living neighborhood that helps you extract energy from food, trains the immune system to tell friend from foe, and even influences mood in ways still being mapped. Picture a kitchen on an easy evening, jars on a shelf, a slow simmer on the stove, the comfortable patience of something fermenting. In your intestines, microbes perform a similar, gentle craft. They break down fibers your own enzymes can't manage, turning them into small molecules your cells can use, passing along vitamins and freeing minerals at a pace that suits a long, quiet life. Some strains stay close to the surface, like friendly shopkeepers on a familiar street. Others set up deeper inside and work in the background, seldom noticed, always present. You are not one voice. You are a chorus that hums softly and keeps you well. This isn't a story of takeover. It is a partnership that began long before memory, an exchange of space and sustenance for skills and services. Each person's microbiome is a little different, shaped by what they eat, where they live, and even the soil of places they've touched. A walk through a garden, a taste of something fresh, a breath near the sea, all can add new voices to the mix. If that sounds too large to hold, return to the kitchen image. Sauerkraut in a jar doesn't need to be told how to become itself. It simply does, slowly, with a shuffle of invisible helpers. Your inner shelves work in the same considerate way. Most of the time, you don't need to do anything but be kind to them, and they will be kind to you. From your inner city of microbes, step gently onto a forest floor in your thoughts and watch a different kind of community move like water. Army ants travel as a dark river along the ground, hundreds of thousands strong. When they meet a gap, a streamlet, a crack, a thorny tangle, they do not wait for the world to change. They change themselves into what the moment needs. One ant anchors to the edge, another attaches to that ant, another steps into place, and in a few heartbeats, the colony has made a bridge from living bodies, flexible and strong. Traffic flows across, workers carrying food, others carrying brood, the slow and the fast mixed into a single pace. When the last ant from the old bank reaches the new, the bridge disassembles behind it and pours forward to become marching ground again.
There is no commander on a high branch giving orders. The rule is local. If you sense a gap and feel a neighbor's touch in a certain way, you hold. If the weight grows heavy, you adjust. If the press of feet above you lightens, you release and move on. From these small decisions, a structure appears and vanishes as needed. It is a soothing lesson to carry. Sometimes the most reliable strength in a group doesn't come from a plan shouted once, but from simple, shared habits followed quietly together. You can rest inside that idea and feel how it echoes your own cellular life, the countless tiny agreements your body keeps each moment without a leader, each part reading its neighbors and doing just enough. The forest dims into green shadow. The ant river sinks back into the leaf litter. The path along the shore returns. From land to sea again, and into water that holds one of the most adaptable minds on the planet. In the hush of the ocean, an octopus drifts like a scrap of night, patterns changing across its skin as if it were remembering and forgetting the seafloor in the same breath. Its intelligence shows in the visible ways, unscrewing jars, arranging shells, learning routes, but a quieter flexibility plays out at a smaller scale. Most animals translate DNA into proteins by a strict script, with only small edits made as the message passes through. Many octopuses are different. They can make targeted edits to their RNA, the working copies that carry instructions from genes to the cell's machinery. With this careful revision, they adjust how certain proteins are built in real time, especially in the nervous system. Neurons can be tuned for temperature, for the pace of signals, for the specific demands of a changing habitat. It is not the same as rewriting their DNA. It is more like changing a recipe card after tasting a single batch than cooking the next pot to match the water and the weather. This capacity offers a kind of moment-by-moment fit with the world. In a colder current, the octopus may favor versions of proteins that keep nervous messaging moving smoothly. In calmer or warmer water, a different set may be more comfortable. The edit is temporary, precise, and reversible. You could think of it as the ocean's answer to the ant bridge. Instead of bodies arranging themselves into a passable shape, the octopus arranges its inner instructions to match what the hour asks. No ceremony is required. The chemistry simply allows what is useful, and life benefits from the permission.
If you stitch these three places together, your inner neighborhood of microbes, the moving bridge of ants, and the octopus revising its own notes, the pattern is easy to rest inside. Cooperation does not need a shout to hold. It needs reliable exchanges. In the body, you provide shelter and steady meals. Your microbes return the favor with nutrients and training for the immune system. In the colony, one ant's decision to hold position gives others a path to follow. The group returns the favor by rearranging when the weight grows too much. In the ocean, a flexible messenger lets a mind stay clear as circumstances shift. In return, that mind continues to explore, feed, and hide with exquisite timing. Everywhere, the rule seems to be the same. Keep things simple. Keep listening. Keep adjusting. Nightfall Travels takes a slow breath with these facts because they stand on their own. The microbiome's work does not require drama to be meaningful. It is as ordinary and as necessary as a bakery's first warm loaf in the morning. The ant's bridge does not need a story of heroism. It is a rope made of small promises kept for as long as needed. The octopus's edits do not ask to be called miraculous. They are the ocean's version of neat handwriting, rewritten once the tide smudges a line. If you find yourself measuring your day against complicated demands, these lives offer a calmer pace to borrow. Let the rules be few. Let the adjustments be gentle, and allow the whole to be wiser than any single part. Before we move on, draw one more soft thread between these images and your own breath. Your lungs, your gut, your skin, the nerves that carry messages and return again with replies, all of them rely on local signals summed into calm action. You are already good at this. You have practiced it since the first minute you were alive. You keep balance the way ants find crossings, not by memorizing a map, but by feeling the edges and making the next small choice. You keep steady the way an octopus keeps its thoughts clear in colder water, not by resisting the change, but by allowing a quiet revision. And you nourish the company you keep inside you, letting it nourish you back. As the night settles further,
Keep the images simple. A warm kitchen where unseen workers turn food into comfort, a living bridge that appears just long enough to serve its purpose and then flows away, a drifting shape that edits its instructions like a calm note in the margin. Nothing loud happens here, everything works, and you do not need to do anything but notice. Here, with Nightfall Travels, that is our measure. We will carry it with us into the next gentle corner of the planet's story. For now, breathe easily and allow the chorus within you to hum.
Let the water grow still around the drifting octopus in your mind, and let the forest path become soft again underfoot. We'll continue at the same unhurried pace, pausing with a question that animals sometimes answer in a mirror. Most creatures can see their reflection, but very few seem to recognize it as themselves. In quiet trials, researchers place a small mark where an animal can't see it without help, then offer a mirror. If the animal uses the reflection to investigate the mark on its own body, that response suggests a kind of self-recognition. Great apes have done this, so have dolphins, elephants, and magpies, and there are signs that manta rays and some fish attend to their reflections in meaningful ways. It's not human-style thought, but it hints that the boundary between me and not me is not ours alone to notice. The moment itself is gentle to imagine. A hand raised to a brow, a trunk exploring a patch of skin, a bird turning its head, bright eye and dark eye taking turns with the glass. It helps to hold this with a soft caveat. The mirror test is one measure among many, shaped by human expectations. An animal that fails it may still carry a rich sense of itself, built for scent, for sound, or for the press of water and current. A dog's world is crowded with information we can't smell, a bat's world mapped by echoes we cannot feel, and a whale's sense of family stretches across miles of ocean in calls pitched below our hearing. So the mirror is a kind of key, but not the only one. What matters here is the quiet implication. Awareness comes in many textures, and some of them look back. From a surface that reflects faces, turn to a planet that has sometimes reflected only change. Over the last 500 million years, Earth has experienced at least 5 great endings, mass extinctions that erased most living species of their times. Volcanoes lifted ash and gases into the sky, seas rose and fell, climates stumbled and found new paths. The most severe event, the Permian extinction, emptied oceans and scoured coasts and interiors both, taking more than 9 in 10 marine species and most lineages on land. The losses are impossible to hold at once, so let them become simple shapes. An old shoreline, quiet and absent, a reef gone silent, a forest stilled. After each event, the planet did not reset to a familiar chapter. It turned a page and began again with what endured.
And some things always do endure. Picture not the vanished giants, but the small survivors that crouched in crevices and burrows, tucked beneath stones, or drifted as spores over distances measured by wind. These seed species were not necessarily seeds. Some were tough plants, some were modest animals. Some were microbial communities that found warmth near vents or safety in sediments. They were tiny instructions preserved against weather, a living margin that kept the next story possible. As conditions allowed, they divided and expanded, membranes built upon membranes, forests returning from root and sprout, coasts glittering again with new shelled lives. The cast was different each time. The roles were reassigned, but the play resumed, steady and quiet where it could. Extinction on that scale is a brutal teacher, yet it leaves behind the most calming lesson of all. Life continues its attempt. In that same spirit, delicate, relentless, another story runs on the underside of leaves and along the ribs of twigs. In tropical forests, certain fungi find their way into the bodies of insects and rearrange their behavior with chemical care. An ant climbs where it would otherwise forage. It grips a small edge with its mandibles at a place high enough and cool enough to suit the fungus, and then it stops. Within the insect, filaments spread through tissues, while precise molecules borrow the ant's muscles for a task the ant did not choose. A narrow stalk grows outward and releases spores to the air, drifting onto the trails below. The cycle is so tuned to time and temperature that it behaves like a clock made of living parts, adjusted by shade and mist. It's disturbing if you look too hard at it, so we will not. We'll simply note what it shows, that small chemistries can steer large movements, and that the forest keeps a ledger where every niche is used, even the ones that make us shiver. Hold these three images together without strain. In a mirror, a few species seem to notice themselves and lightly test that idea with a fingertip or a beak. In deep time, endings emptied the world and left space for new beginnings, which arrived as they always do, from the edges and the understory. On shaded stems, a fungus takes a path we would refuse and yet pursues its work with the same precision found everywhere else. There is a quiet connection among them if you let the mind step back. Each is a kind of awareness applied to survival. The mirror is awareness of self. The mass extinction is awareness of time, written in alternating layers of loss and renewal. The fungus is awareness of possibility, the unoccupied route taken because it fits.
If that feels too abstract, soften it with smaller frames. Return to the elephant approaching a field of bones with a measured pace, pausing to touch and pause again. To the dolphin turning toward a familiar signature whistle in a wide, gray expanse of sea. To the magpie tilting at a bit of color where no berry sits. The impression matters more than the test itself. Attention can be inward as well as outward, and the quiet of night can hold both without conflict. Let that settle like dust in a beam of late light. Now, let the planet's long breath pass through you. Imagine a thin line on a rock face showing a sudden change in ancient chemistry, a band where oceans faltered and then returned. Imagine a hillside where the first green shoots after fire thread through charcoal. Not in sorrow, simply in the manner of things. We are used to thinking of history as a chain of moments with names and dates. But the Earth writes it more simply, with layers of sediment, with the spread of roots into ash, with a reef that starts small and grows in a rough ring year by patient ear. You can rest inside that because your own life knows slower measures too. Bones that mend, skin that renews, the mind's ability to find a new path after an old one closes. As for the fungus, we leave it where it belongs, in a dim understory doing what all living things do, converting what the world offers into a way forward. The chemistry that steers a muscle can steer a leaf's pores, and a jellyfish's pulse, and the opening of a flower in early morning. Life repeats useful patterns, borrowing and revising them until they fit new shapes.
If the pattern sometimes wears a mask we don't like, the conclusion doesn't change. The design is precise and it persists. Draw only this from it tonight, that even the strange is made of familiar parts, and that you are permitted to set the image down once you've seen what it suggests. Nightfall Travels keeps to the same pace as we turn these pieces in our hands. If the mirror's lesson feels like a small, calm flame, let it burn low and steady. If the mass extinctions feel too large, reduce them to a single promise that after endings, beginnings come. If the fungal thread feels too sharp, blur the edges and step back into the shape of the forest as a whole. Green rising and fading and rising again, always with more patience than we think possible. Before we move on, take one long, quiet breath. Let it arrive without effort and leave the same way. You do not have to solve anything here. You are allowed simply to notice that awareness is widespread, that endurance runs deep, and that even unsettling strategies belong to an old, precise library of living rules. With that, we'll close this page softly and carry the same gentleness forward, unhurried, and awake to the next small wonder.
Let your thoughts drift toward color, and let color arrive without insistence. Blue seems to be everywhere, the sky, the far ocean, a sudden flash of wing, but in living bodies, true blue is rare. Many of the things that appear blue are not storing blue pigment the way a leaf holds green. They are shaping light. On feathers and scales and delicate wing surfaces, tiny structures sit in immaculate order, so small you could not find them with your fingertip. These microscopic layers and lattices bend and scatter the white of daylight, canceling many wavelengths and sending blue toward your eye. It is called structural coloration, and it's closer to architecture than to paint. A peacock's train, a morpho butterfly's wing, the crest of a blue jay, they look saturated because air and matter are arranged just so, allowing certain wavelengths to resonate. If you held one of these feathers in dim light and changed the angle, the color would soften or shift. The blue isn't stored, it's performed. Imagine light like rain on a patterned roof, the drip lines converging until a single trickle finds a path. That trickle is the blue you see, a calm, precise outcome of shape. This kind of color is steady enough to count on and delicate enough to feel new each time. It helps bodies be seen when they want to be seen, and at other angles it helps them disappear into shadow. You can rest with that image, a wing turning, the hue pulsing a little as the angle changes, a quiet reminder that appearance can be the meeting of light and design, rather than a jar of dye and a cell. The rarity of true blue pigment makes each living blue a small cooperative project between sunlight and structure. It is gentle to think that much of the beauty we notice is not something stored and spent, but something generated in the moment, like breath. From color, walk the mind to a broad savanna at dusk, the dust faintly doled, the air full of low bird calls. A family of elephants moves slowly in the open, ears relaxed, calves tucked near older legs. Among the grasses lies a scatter of bones. The herd slows without a signal, as if they were easing down a hill together. Trunks reach forward and pause. A matriarch touches the smooth dome of a skull and holds there, then moves along the arc of a tusk, then stands. Others join and step back in turn. Sometimes they return to such places after seasons have passed, arriving as if to check the texture of a memory. They do not hurry, and they do not fuss. Their attention is steady and tactile, lingering in a way that suggests an emotional weight we do not need to measure to respect. The gestures are simple enough to picture, a trunk lifting and lowering like a slow breath, a pause that stretches beyond mere curiosity, a circle formed around what once was living. There is no need to name it beyond what you see. It is care. It is recognition. It is the kind of time that grief asks for, spacious and soft around the edges. Elephants carry long relationships over long distances, and in their bodies, capable of great force, adept at fine control, there is room for a tenderness that matches their size. You can hold that scene in your mind with the sound turned low. A light wind in dry leaves, a faint clatter as bone touches bone, and then the herd moving on, not forgetting, simply continuing in the way life does.
From grassland light, slip underwater, where color changes and edges blur into soft gradations of blue-green. Coral reefs seem like bright stone gardens, but they are cities built by small animals working patiently, polyp by polyp. Each coral polyp is a soft-bodied creature with a ring of tiny stinging tentacles and a mouth that receives the ocean's small gifts. With dissolved minerals pulled from the seawater, the colony lays down calcium carbonate, a stony skeleton that lasts as individuals bud and die. Over time, these skeletons accumulate into knolls and walls and branching thickets, an architecture that can extend for hundreds of miles in a slow-motion build measured in millimeters per year. Within the branching rooms and overhangs, life settles in dense variety. Fishes grazing and darting, crustaceans tucked into crevices, mollusks fanning the water with quiet motion. Reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, and still they host nearly a quarter of marine species, making homes where the sea's traffic can pause, feed, and breed. Inside each coral's tissues, a partnership glows. Tiny algae, often called zooxanthellae, live as welcomed guests within the polyp cells. In the daylight, they catch sunlight and use it to make sugars, passing much of that energy to their animal hosts. The coral, in return, offers shelter and the waste products the algae can use as nutrients. It is a routine exchange that turns starlight, filtered through seawater, into limestone and life, a tidy set of trades in a quiet condominium made of bone-white stone. At night, the algae rest and the corals extend their tentacles to feed, adding small prey to the budget. The rhythm is unassuming. Sunlight in the morning, a slow chorus of photosynthesis through the day, a gentle unfurling in the dark. If you drifted above a reef in the last blue minutes before evening, you might feel the faintest sense of a city changing shifts, lights dimming while others rise. The shape of a reef is easy to carry when you're resting. Imagine an open hand, fingers spread into branching coral that breaks current into safe pockets. Within those pockets, bodies in many colors bloom and hide and pass. Parrotfish scrape at algae with their beaks and leave sand behind. Tiny shrimp clean larger fish, picking at parasites with neat, careful attention. A turtle glides through, the rhythm of its strokes unbothered by the busy lanes around it. Everything moves at the pace of water, unhurried, constant, always enough to register, and never enough to alarm. The coral framework is the quiet host to all of it, built one ring at a time by animals too small to notice from far away, and yet across centuries, their work becomes an island, a border, a breakwater. This, too, you can connect back to color and to elephants without effort. Structural blue is a partnership between matter and light. Elephant remembrance is a partnership between time and touch. Coral abundance is a partnership between animals and algae, with sunlight as the third steady partner. In each, the shape you can see is the surface of an agreement carried carefully over days, years, or ages. None of it announces itself. All of it reveals itself if you are willing to slow down. There is a comfort in knowing that much of what we call beauty is cooperative. A feather holds a lattice thin enough to vanish at the edges of sight, and a wave of light makes it blue. A trunk follows the edge of a skull, not out of obligation, but because the animal is made to notice and to feel. A reef rises because countless small mouths and smaller cells share the work of turning a sunny day into stone and shade. None of these scenes asks you to do anything. They offer a pace that is already familiar to your breath, in, out, and in again, with small adjustments as the light or the mood or the tide changes. If your day has lacked gentleness, take the blue first. Let it fill your thoughts like clear air, a color made by arrangement and angle, present when needed and softened when you turn. If your day has felt thin, take the elephants next. Allow the image of a circle of bodies standing with what is gone to give weight back to the moment you're in. And if your day has felt scattered, take the reef last, with its patient architecture and its layered trades, and imagine your attention settling into one of its sheltered rooms until the water around you is the only sound. Nightfall Travels moves on this same tide, easy and consistent. We follow where the gentle agreements are, and we pause where small makers have built something that lasts. Before we go, let the structural blues fade to the soft gray of evening. Let the elephants lift their trunks one by one and continue across the plain. And let the reef dim to a calm constellation of night-feeding mouths. The world is still here. Its colors, its bonds, and its cities are intact in the dark as surely as in the day. Breathe once for each of them, and then rest where you are.
Let the sea quiet of the reef ebb out of your thoughts, and picture instead something that looks like a splash of yolk yellow paint on damp wood. It isn't paint. It's a slime mold, a single-celled organism that can become many-celled without becoming many minds, a living sheet of protoplasm that moves in slow, patient pulses. It has no brain, no nerves, and no fixed shape, but when offered a simple puzzle, it answers with a kind of bodily reasoning. In calm laboratory mazes, a slime mold begins by flowing down every corridor at once, sending thin exploratory strands toward each turn. A bit of food waits at 2 exits, and the mold tastes for the faint chemicals drifting back from those sources. Where the signal is promising, its internal currents strengthen. Where the signal is weak, the flow subsides. Over an hour or a night, the sheet withdraws from dead ends and thickens along the route that links the food in the least wasteful way. What remains is not a thought, but a path, a thread of living tissue that traces the most efficient connection the situation allows. If you could watch it close up, you would see the body itself performing the calculation. Slow waves of fluid shuttled forward and back along tubular veins, opening and narrowing in a rhythm that feels like breathing. The mold leaves behind a slime trail that helps it remember where it has already gone, so it doesn't waste itself on old roads. When the meal is finished, it can relax those tubes and flow elsewhere, as if lifting a tent and walking it to a new meadow. Researchers sometimes use the mold's quiet problem-solving to sketch out transportation routes, and the parallels can be soothing to consider. A city's trains and buses find efficient ways through dense neighborhoods. A slime mold's veins do the same across the leaf litter. No speeches, no signals flown overhead,
only local rules, gentle feedback, and the willingness to withdraw from what doesn't serve. From these small, thoughtful motions, lift your attention high enough to see an ocean of leaves. The Amazon rainforest is so large that it runs its own weather, drawing water upward in a slow daily tide. Each morning, as the light strengthens, billions of trees open the tiny pores on their leaves and release vapor. The air above the canopy thickens with that breath. Warm currents lift it skyward, where it cools, condenses into clouds, and returns as rain. The process has a simple name, transpiration, but what it does is intricate and kind. Moisture rises from the forest, becomes cloud, and falls back to the forest over and over, carried westward by wide winds. In this way, the Amazon makes much of the rain it drinks, and that steady loop helps regulate the rhythm of an entire continent. The sky itself becomes a river, moving fresh water not just above trees and vines, but out across the Andes and beyond the shore, where it can influence storms far out to sea.
The picture is gentle to hold. In early morning, the canopy exhales and a faint mist lifts through shafts of light. By afternoon, the sky gathers itself into gray softness, and the leaves receive what they sent, a kind of careful borrowing and returning we can understand without numbers. The trees are not alone in this. Air flows through stomata the way water moves through a coral's city. Trace gases and pollen ride those currents like small passengers, and the whole cycle repeats with a reliability that makes the forest feel like an organ in a body, one that beats in vapor rather than blood. When parts of that organ are cut away, when large patches of trees are lost to chains and fire, the loop weakens. Less shade warms the ground, fewer leaves lift water, fewer clouds gather, and the rain that would have fallen moves elsewhere. Drought spreads in steps so small they can hide inside a single season. The same cycle that heals becomes thin. It can help to imagine the moisture itself as a traveler, taking a calm journey from root to leaf, from leaf to sky, from sky to stream, and then back again through another route. Each molecule makes the trip many times across the basin, east to west, a relay that keeps the air gentle and the ground drinkable. People sometimes call these paths flying rivers, and the name fits the feeling you get when you picture them. Quiet, invisible currents that carry a forest's breath across a sky so wide it can hold a whole day's weather in one view. To rest with the Amazon is to rest with that picture of circulation. There is no need to measure anything here. It is enough to know that the forest breathes, and that the breath builds clouds. Now let the heat and damp fade until the air is cold and still. Snow rests on dry leaves. Beneath it, a small frog looks as if nothing alive could be inside. The wood frog survives winter by letting the season pass directly through its body. When the first hard freezes arrive, water in the spaces between its cells turns to ice. The frog's heart stops, its lungs stop, the blood no longer moves. To protect its cells from being punctured by the sharp edges of forming ice, the frog floods its tissues with cryoprotectants, simple molecules like glucose and urea that act as natural antifreeze.
They help keep the water inside cells from freezing, stabilizing the membranes and the delicate machinery that will be needed again in spring. For days or weeks, the animal is a crisp, motionless shape hidden under leaf litter, unhurt by temperatures that would ruin other bodies.
It is not death. It is a pause as deep as a story can bear. When sunlight returns and the air softens, the ice within and around the frog begins to melt from the outside in. Liquids creep back into tiny channels. The heart trembles and finds its beat. The lungs take up air. The frog blinks, and the forest opens as if it had only been a moment. In a short time, it can hop toward meltwater pools where the first chorus of the season begins, voices rising along the edges of thawed ponds. The transition from stillness to movement is so complete that if you didn't know what had happened, you would call it ordinary waking. But it is more than that. It is a return from winter's hard arithmetic, a proof that living tissue can be stored like a promise and then redeemed when the hour changes. This, too, is easy to connect to the other two scenes if you keep the thread simple. The slime mold explores with many small paths and then pulls back to the one that works, saving itself for a better use. The forest lifts water into the air and gathers it again, saving the landscape from extremes. The frog brings its own water to a standstill and then releases it, saving the body for spring. 3 kinds of patience, 3 ways of solving a problem without noise. They rely on local signals, practiced routines, and a trust in timing that is longer than a thought and shorter than a lifetime. If you want to rest with images, choose one for your breath and let it guide the next minutes. Breathe in as the slime mold swells along a promising corridor, and breathe out as it eases back from a dead end. Breathe in with the trees as vapor rises, and out with the rain as it falls. Breathe in with the stillness of the frozen frog, and out as the first soft stroke of its returning heart. These are not metaphors you need to work at. They are simple, factual motions that happen in the world while you sleep, while you wake, and while you listen now. Their calm is available. Nightfall Travels is built for this pace. We move from the cleverness of a body that has no brain to the cleverness of a forest that has no single tree in charge, to the cleverness of a frog that meets winter by becoming part of it. None of this needs to be dramatic to be extraordinary. It only needs to be seen, then set down like a stone on a windowsill, a familiar weight you can return to when the day asks for more than you have. For now, let the maze go still. The clouds drift into gray softness, and the frog tuck itself back beneath the leaves. There is time enough for everything gentle.
Let the forest thaw and settle into a darker blue, and follow that color down beneath the surface of the sea, where sound travels farther than light. In deep water, a blue whale calls in notes too low for your ears to catch, tones that roll through the ocean like distant thunder. These calls are steady and spare, rising and falling over minutes, then repeating with patient regularity. In quiet conditions, they can travel across whole basins, slipping under storms and ship lanes, touching shorelines the singers will never see. Whales use these long sounds to find one another, to signal readiness, to keep track of companions spread out across miles of water.
Each population leans toward its own phrasing, and the patterns can drift with time the way a river shifts in slow seasons, new turns added, old turns abandoned. For humpbacks, the song is more elaborate, verses nested inside verses, and phrases passed along a coastline until the year's theme belongs to many throats instead of one. You don't need the specifics to rest with the idea. Think of water holding a message for a long distance, then letting it go, the way a low bell tone seems to hang in your chest for a few breaths after it fades. The ocean has carried such messages longer than most of our mountains have stood. Even now, far from noise, the calls move through layers of water at different speeds, bending with temperature and salt. Some layers guide the notes the way a canyon guides the wind, and the sound arrives with less effort than you would guess across a space that would tire a swimmer in a few strokes. It is enough to hold the picture, a mind surfacing, taking air, and then leaning again into the dark with a voice that crosses hours to reach another mind shaped for listening. The sea remembers what it carries. On land, a smaller, quieter kind of memory waits in sleep that can last longer than history has a reason to record. A seed is a plan wrapped in patience. Inside a hard shell or a papery coat, a plant's first leaves and first root are sketched in miniature. The rest is a pause so deep it looks like nothing. Some seeds break this rest after a season. Others wait through drought and frost. A few have waited through centuries. In one careful case, a date palm seed found in an ancient ruin, softened in modern water, felt warmth at its shell and woke. The plant that rose from it lifted green into a light that did not exist when it fell from its parent, and yet the instructions were clear enough to bridge the interval. Most of the time, dormancy is shorter, and the triggers are common. A cold period to mark winter's end, a certain tilt of moisture and temperature that says spring is real, a trickle of oxygen reaching a tiny embryo. But the principle is constant. The future can be folded into a quiet shape and carried through years that are not ready yet.
If you turn that image in your hands, it keeps giving. A seed's coat holds back water and swelling until a few conditions agree. Inside, sugars and proteins are arranged like supplies in a small, neat room. When the shell cracks and a root tip feels the drag of soil, the chemistry changes from storage to motion. Enzymes awake, starches melt into sugars. The root goes down, the shoot goes up, and the plant that waited without complaint begins to spend what it saved. There is no hurry to it and no waste. The design is so common we forget to call it remarkable, but it fits the night well. A long-held promise, then a single, steady act. Return now to the sea, this time to the light it makes for itself. Bioluminescence, the production of cold light through a small, tidy reaction, has evolved many times in distant branches of life's tree. The chemistry shares a shape across those branches. A light-making molecule meets an enzyme that helps it release energy as a photon, and a brief glow answers the contact. But the ingredients differ in detail from one lineage to another, as if the planet composed variations on the same simple theme in caves, in waves, and down where sunlight never comes. Some creatures use the glow to lure a meal, an anglerfish dangling a living lantern in front of a patient mouth. Some use it to vanish, lighting their bellies to erase their shadows when a predator below looks up. Some use it to signal, the brief pulses fireflies trade above a summer field,
or the synchrony that turns a mangrove into a slow, breathing constellation. In the deep ocean, where day is only a rumor from above, the glow is everywhere. Bodies write their edges in soft blue, then erase the line again as soon as it has served. If you stand by a dark shore and stir water with your hand, you might see a handful of stars scatter and fade. If you wait in a warm field at night, you might see a pattern in the flashes around you, each small body answering another in a rhythm that feels ordered because it is. The light is not warm, and it leaves no coal behind. It is a brief accounting, energy in, message out, then darkness again. The ease of it belongs to the hour. Hands and wings carry their lamps only as long as needed.
Let the mind climb from ocean dark to stellar dark, from a lantern in a wave to the furnaces that once made the calcium in your bones. The elements that shaped your body were built in stars by a slow stacking of lighter atoms into heavier ones. Deep in a massive star's core, heat and pressure fuse simple fuel into more complex forms. When such a star's balance fails, it collapses and then unravels in a supernova, flinging its work into space as dust and fine grains. Over time, gravity gathers those grains into new clouds, and from those clouds, new stars and planets condense. On one of those planets, ocean water helped carbon find itself in chains and rings. In time, calcium joined with carbon and oxygen to make shells and limestone. And much later still, calcium gave stiffness to the skeletons of animals that would stand on land and breathe. The iron in your blood, the phosphorus in your thoughts, the carbon in your voice, the calcium in your stride, all of them are older than the earth and were used by other worlds before they were you. There is a comfort in letting that settle without embellishment. You are not separate from the night sky above your window. You are part of the same cycle that once lit it brighter than any torch. The bones you lean on spent time as light in a star, as ash in space, as dust in a cloud, as a quiet mineral in a sea creature's shell. And now they serve a pattern of movement and rest. When you breathe, the oxygen you draw in is the descendant of the same chemistry that once scrubbed ancient seas with rust and then rose into the air. When you speak, your breath becomes someone else's air, and the circle continues. If you want a small set of images to bring to bed, choose 4 and let them rotate with your breath. Inhale with the lone note of a whale as it crosses a basin. Exhale with a seed shell giving way to a root. Inhale with a wave that briefly writes itself in blue along your ankles. Exhale with the thought that your skeleton has already seen stars. The facts hold their shape while you drift. They do not need your effort to remain true. They are already happening, wide as an ocean, small as a seed, steady as a pulse of light, old as the ash that seeded the cloud that seeded the world. Nightfall travel stays with you in this simple way, moving from voice to germination, from glow to origin. We will continue the same gentle pace, returning to hidden senses and planet-wide rhythms, to maps that birds can feel and cycles the air can keep. For now, let the ocean keep its song. Let the seed keep its sleep until rain says otherwise. Let the water keep its stars, and the sky keep the story it wrote into your bones. Breathe once more and rest.
Keep the night dim and kind.
and step into a garden where colors you know are only half the story. To your eyes, a daisy may seem simple, pale petals, a golden center. But to a bee, the flower wears hidden signs. Many blossoms paint themselves in ultraviolet, a register of light we can't see. Patterns called nectar guides glow like soft runways leading from petal to center, a precise invitation that says, "Here is the way, and here is the reward." Bees arrive with eyes tuned to this spectrum, reading rings and arrows we miss, then leave dusted with pollen that will become another flower's future. The exchange is calm and mutual. The plant offers light and sweetness, the bee offers transport. When you walk past a border of blooms, the plain faces you see are layered with signals you cannot. And the air, even at rest, is full of directions. The garden carries that same quiet logic across many lives. Some petals quiver in the pitch of a pollinator's wings and sweeten their nectar within minutes, as if a shopkeeper turned up a light when a regular stepped through the door. A bee's memory of a reliable route can last a day. The flower's moment of generosity lasts just long enough to matter. Together, they weave a steady pattern, paths through sunlight, glimmers that appear only to the right eyes, sugars spent and sugars earned. You don't need to learn the wavelengths to feel the ease of it. It's enough to rest with the idea that the world speaks in several alphabets at once, and that many of its letters are written in colors we can only imagine. From the garden's soft codes, travel in your mind to a wide, pale country under a hard blue sky. In the Australian outback, red earth runs toward the horizon and the wind writes faint lines in dust. Kangaroos live here with a patient strategy for years that swing between feast and lean. A mother can pause a pregnancy when conditions are harsh or when the pouch is already busy, holding an embryo at a very early stage until food returns or space opens. This embryonic diapause turns time into a tool. She may have a joey exploring the world outside, another snug in the pouch, and a third waiting as a promise, all at once. When rain fattens the grasses or when the older joey leaves, the pause ends. Quiet signals in her body ease forward and development resumes. It is not a trick so much as a balance, a way to match new life to the season that can carry it.
The image is gentle to keep. A mother crossing sunlit ground, small paws kneading softly against her as a young one shifts inside. A second, older youngster bounding and turning, learning the lay of hollows and shade. And somewhere too small to see, a paused beginning, untroubled by delay, simply held until the land says yes. This is how many animals live where predictability is rare. The plan bends with the weather instead of breaking. The result is no drama, only endurance at daily scale. Follow that thread of flexible identity into water bright with color and motion. In the busy neighborhoods of coral reefs, bodies sometimes change their roles to keep a group complete. Clownfish live in small hierarchies on sea anemones. The largest, most dominant fish is female, the next is male, the rest are juveniles waiting their turn. If the female is lost, the male's body shifts. Hormones change, tissues reorganize, and he becomes the new female, breeding with the next in line. In other reef families, such as many wrasses, the direction runs the other way. Females can become males when the group needs a protector or breeder. The timing is careful, the sequence rehearsed by evolution. First the chemistry, then the behavior, then the outward signs. It is not an act. It is a refitting of the same living tools for a different place in the pattern. The reef is full of such quiet renovations. What seems fixed can soften. What seems unlikely can become ordinary when the hour asks for it. If it helps to hold on to specifics, remember only this: identity in the sea is sometimes a current rather than a stone, and bodies know the path to take when the currents shift. The change is not frantic. It unfolds at the pace of tissues building fresh arrangements from familiar parts, guided by signals as modest and precise as a tide chart.
Lift from the reef to the open sky, where maps are written in forces you cannot see. Birds cross oceans and mountain chains in migrations that return them to the same beaches and hedges year after year. Among the tools they carry is a sense for Earth's magnetic field, a faint awareness of direction that works alongside sun, stars, and the shapes of coasts and rivers. In some birds, tiny crystals of iron may help cells notice the field, like a fingertip notices a draft. In others, light-sensitive proteins in the eye seem to translate magnetism into dim patterns superimposed on the view, a visual whisper a bird can follow as surely as a shoreline. The compass is probably not a single organ, but a set of cues arranged into confidence. Dawn light giving a bearing, scent and memory marking familiar valleys, and an inner leaning toward the right way in blank sky. Imagine a robin at first light, head tilting as if to feel the air, then lifting into a path that will cross rain, clear, rain again, and finally a fence the bird knew last spring. Imagine an albatross banking over gray water for days, resting on the wind while its inner map holds steady. The magnetic field is a soft lattice everywhere, reaching through soil and cloud, and many bodies feel it as easily as we feel the slope of a hill underfoot. It is pleasant to think that the planet is full of threads like this, lines that do not show themselves and do not need to, because they can be trusted. Let those invisible threads lead you to one more quiet rhythm, this time large enough to include everything you know. The Earth breathes through the carbon cycle, moving a simple element through air, water, living things, and stone. When you exhale, you release carbon as carbon dioxide into the air. Leaves take that gas in and use light to build sugar, thin and sweet as a thought. Animals eat the leaves, or the animals that ate the leaves, and the carbon moves again, this time into muscles and movement and warmth. When plants and animals die, decomposers turn them back into what the next lives will need, letting some carbon return to the air and some wash into soil and sea. Oceans absorb and release it with their own slow pulse. Over longer spans, carbon settles into rock or is drawn down by weathering and stored as limestone, or locked deep as fossil fuel, where it waits the way a seed waits, but longer.
Most of the time, the flow stays balanced at the scale of seasons and centuries. Recently, the balance has tilted. Carbon stored for geologic ages has been lifted from stone and burned in a brief, bright century, and the extra in the air warms the planet's skin.
The cycle still works. It has not failed. It is only too full now, like a breath held longer than is comfortable. You do not need numbers to rest with this truth. You can feel the shape of the remedy in the cycle itself. More green work under the sun, more patient stonework that draws carbon down, gentler use of fires that spend what rock kept for ages. The earth already knows how to breathe. Our part is to stop asking it to do so with a weight on its chest. If you want to link these scenes in a way your breath can keep, it is easy. Inhale with the bee's view of a flower, a runway no human eye can see. Exhale with the kangaroo's pause, the embryo waiting untroubled until the time is right. Inhale with the clownfish changing its place in the story, tissues finding a new role with calm precision. Exhale with the robin's inner compass, feeling a line in the air and following it home. Inhale with the leaf taking in your breath, and exhale with the leaf's gift returning to you. None of these motions require effort from you tonight. They are already in motion, woven into the dark outside your window, looping from petal to hive, from pouch to grassland, from anemone to reef, from sky to field, from lung to leaf and back again. Nightfall Travels walks this circle slowly because it is restful to know the world keeps its quiet agreements whether or not we are watching. Hidden colors open when needed. Time bends inside a pouch until the season softens. Bodies change to keep the group whole. The sky itself holds a map in the faintest of lines, and the planet breathes in and out, with us and without us, patient even now. Let those agreements keep you company. Let your breathing be one more small, reliable part of them. Then, still breathing, rest.
Hold the garden's breath and the robin's inner compass and step backward in time to a shoreline so old it has almost forgotten the word. The tide is shallow, the water warm, and the rocks are not exactly rocks. They are stromatolites, layered mounds built by mats of cyanobacteria that trap grains of sediment and cement them with the slow products of sunlight. Imagine a tide pool at first light, its surface slick and still, and beneath it thin films of living cells spread over stone, rising into low domes like loaves proved on a warm counter. Day after day, they make their tiny bargain with the sun. Carbon fixed, oxygen released, a new layer set down. Over unimaginably long spans, those layers grow into rounded forms you can touch, fossils that remember the hush of a world before leaves and bones. In a few places, living stromatolites still lift their smooth backs into modern water, a quiet continuity between seas that knew no fish and seas that carry whales. You can rest with the simplicity of it: light, mineral, membrane, patience, repeated until geology has to take note. From those ancient masonry projects in the shallows, slip outward to a place where the water is deeper and the company is quick and social.
Dolphins move through their blue neighborhoods with energy and ease, trading whistles and clicks that amount to a running commentary on who is where, doing what. Among those sounds, each dolphin carries a signature whistle learned early in life, a pattern of notes like a name. Companions remember one another's signatures for years, calling across murk or distance with the certainty of someone calling to a friend in a crowd. Picture the moment at the surface: breath, arc, splash, and then the soft return of the head to water, followed by a bright loop of sound that travels farther than a hand could reach. Another voice answers, the exchange brief and exact. The pod arranges itself without meeting because the map is being updated in sound. There is no drama in it. It is simply the way a scattered family knits itself together in a medium where eyes are often second best.
You can hold the dolphin's roll call beside the stromatolite's unhurried masonry and feel a calming through line. Both are steady work. Both are ways of marking who and where in a world that offers few hard edges. One writes in stone over eons, the other writes in sound across a moment. And both lean on cooperation, the bacterial films layering on yesterday's layer, the living bodies aligning around familiar voices. The planet seems comfortable with both speeds. Now, let the water fall away and the air grow bright with heat. Before you stretches the Sahara as it is today. Sand, stone, a wind that has time to cross whole countries before it meets a hill. But set the clock back a handful of millennia and the scene softens. The African humid period turned much of this desert into grassland and lakes. Seasonal monsoons strengthened, rains returned, and the land carried elephants, crocodiles, hippos, and human communities that left their memory on stone, paintings of swimmers, hunters, and herds, where now only sand travels. Rivers braided across flats, lakes gathered in basins so wide they might as well have been inland seas. Then, just as gradually, the orbital patterns that favored rain slipped away. The monsoon weakened, and green retreated to where it could hold. The desert returned like an old tide coming back over its own footprints. What remains is a layered memory, a climate that can flip its mood when the slow dials of Earth lean in a different direction, and a record written both in sediments and in the marks people left on cave walls. It is restful to think of this not as the loss we must feel tonight, but as proof that landscapes carry many versions of themselves in reserve, each waiting on the sky's long arithmetic. Under the dunes lie old lake beds, river channels like buried threads, and pollen dropped in quiet layers that still tell of grass and shade. The present is real and dry. The past is real and green. Both are held in the same basin with patience.
From a desert that once wore lakes, step down to a table where a creature no heavier than your thumb considers a choice that looks like nothing. In a clean experiment, a bee trained to expect sweetness from fewer marks on a card will often choose a blank card over one with a single symbol. The bee treats none as less than some, an understanding so small and so abstract we once thought it lived mostly in large brains. The scene is easy to picture without the apparatus. A small body lands, measures with compound eyes attuned to patterns and contrast, then moves toward the empty option because, in the day's rule set, emptiness is the better bet. It is not a miracle, and it does not ask for applause. It is a tidy piece of reasoning, scaled to a busy life. Find the simplest hint of more reward with the least energy spent, remember it for the next hour, and press on. Take that small arithmetic and carry it into a much larger one written across valleys and rivers. When wolves returned to Yellowstone after long absence, the change rippled outward in careful steps.
Elk, fewer in number and warier in habit, browsed less along stream banks. Young willows and cottonwoods rose higher. Their shade cooled water. Beavers found more wood for dams and made more quiet pools. Birds nested in the thicker growth. Banks held together, and in places channels narrowed and meandered differently. This long sequence has a name, trophic cascade, but you can leave the term behind and keep only the comfortable chain. One species resumes its old job. Those it hunts adjust. Plants that were held down lift. Builders arrive. The water slows and stays. The land reshapes itself with less hurry. It is not a fairy tale of instant healing. It is a nudge that lets many small processes return to an older pace. The river answers not with magic, but with physics and roots.
Thread these scenes into a cord you can lay beside your pillow. Stromatolites show how patient, collective work can write itself into stone. Dolphins show how clear signals keep a group linked across shifting space. The Sahara's green memory shows how landscapes hold more than one face and how the sky's slow choices turn pages. Bees show that even tiny minds carry a clean idea of nothing when the day requires it. Wolves show that one role, restored, can loosen a knot the land could not untie alone. Together, they illustrate a kind of modest competence that the earth displays everywhere when it is given room. Nothing here hurries. Nothing here wastes. Everything is a matter of timing and fit. If you want to breathe with them in order, take 5 quiet rounds. Inhale with the first light over a shallow bay and exhale with the slow settling of another stromatolite layer. Inhale with a dolphin's head rising into air and exhale with its name call sliding back through blue. Inhale with a green rain over a Sahara that is no longer green and exhale with the dust that remembers. Inhale with a bee choosing the empty card and exhale with the small satisfaction of a rule confirmed. Inhale with the shadow of a wolf slipping across snow and exhale with the sound of water visiting a new bank because plants held it there. Nightfall Travels keeps to this gentle cadence because it suits the facts and the hour. The planet's older stories are not loud, and their quiet is generous. They remind you that even in systems too large to hold, calm patterns repeat. Collaboration that leaves mark, voices that keep companions close, climates that can turn and turn back, minds that work cleanly with little, and relationships that ripple into place until a whole valley breathes easier. Let the images dim to outlines. Let the room take their weight. Let your breath keep the measure they have set. Then rest.
Keep the river's new curve in mind and step back into a garden where listening happens without ears. A flower that seems still can respond to a voice it was made to notice. When a bee approaches, wings drumming the air at a particular pitch, some blossoms vibrate in sympathy, their petals acting like thin instruments tuned to that frequency. Within minutes, the plant's nectar grows a little sweeter. It's not a thought and not a choice. It's mechanics sliding into chemistry. Vibration at the right tone moves through petal and sepal. A signal travels to the nectaries, and sugar concentration rises just enough to matter. The timing is gentle, quick but not rushed. A pollinator receives a better reward precisely when it is near. The plant receives more careful visits in return. The exchange arrives and fades with the sound itself, like a light turned up for a guest and lowered again after the door closes. You can picture the scene at a quiet edge of day. A bee drawing near, petals quivering so slightly you'd need still air to see it. Sweetness rising like a soft breath, and then the garden becoming plain again once the visitor has gone. Carry that small partnership forward to a stranger one that clings to stone. A lichen is not one being, but two, sometimes more. A fungus that builds shelter and structure joined with an alga or a cyanobacterium that pulls sugar from light. Under a hand lens, the forms feel tidy, crusts that paint rock, leaf-like lobes that overlap like scales, tiny branches that stand up like a miniature forest. The fungus weaves the house, a skin that gathers dew, a scaffold that shields from wind and sun, a surface that grips bark and mineral. Inside, the photosynthetic partner sits in bright rooms and works at a steady pace, paying rent in carbohydrates, accepting water and minerals in return. This pairing goes where other life hesitates. On boulders at high altitude, on fence rails after frost, on roofs, on tombstones, on driftwood left by a receding tide. Over time, many lichens help turn rock to soil. Acids etch the surface, fine particles loosen, and the first dust that can hold moss arrives. Slow work becomes a foothold. From there, other lives can follow.
If you rest with lichens long enough, you notice how they also keep time for us. Some species grow by millimeters a year. Their size can hint at the age of a stone's exposure. Others are sensitive to the air's impurities, thinning where the atmosphere has changed and recovering when it clears. They are a small, durable memory written on surfaces we pass without looking twice, a quiet collaboration that makes hard places softer. The partnership is not always gentle. The fungus is the frame and the rule, the alga the tenant, but together they survive in places each would find difficult alone. It is a calm lesson that fits the night. Sometimes the best protection is a patient agreement. From stone that hosts a blended life, return to a body so small it needs only a film of moisture to be at home. Tardigrades, the water bears you've met, are as resilient as life gets at their size. When their surroundings dry or freeze or flood with salt, they withdraw into a ton and slow nearly everything they are. In that compact form, protective molecules and specialized proteins shield delicate parts, and time loses purchase. Years can pass. Then, on a fresh, wet morning, water climbs back through the ton's surfaces, and the little legs extend. Motion returns at a modest speed, as if the animal had only dozed. If the world offered a long, hard century to many kinds of life, a tardigrade's trick would probably carry through it. They are not invincible. They are simply prepared for edges. The edge of a tide pool drying to salt, the edge of a needle of ice, the edge of a stone that bakes at noon and cools at night. It can be restful to imagine such readiness folded into a creature smaller than a comma. Endurance does not need to be large to be real.
Under the earth, another small mammal holds a different set of unusual strengths. Naked mole rats live in colonies beneath dry ground in branching tunnels where air is thin and temperatures do not swing wildly. They have a queen and workers, a division of labor more often seen in insects.
Their bodies bear the calm signature of a life without sudden changes. Low metabolic demands, remarkable tolerance for low oxygen, skin that seems to ignore acid burn, nerves that do not signal certain kinds of pain as most mammals do. Most striking to us is their aging, or the soft refusal of it. Many animals show a steady rise in the risk of death as the years accrue. Naked mole rats show far less of that slope, a near flat line across spans that feel long for a creature so small. Their cells maintain proteins with notable care. Their tissues seem resistant to the missteps that lead to cancers in other species. Walk the tunnels in your mind, and it is simple to see why this suits them. A long-lived colony that keeps doing ordinary work, dig, fetch, feed the queen's young, push soil up into small cones at the surface, benefits from bodies that stay in repair without drama. The story is not a promise for us, only a reminder that lifespans can be tuned and that some tunes are written in a key quiet enough to miss. And then, from tunnels to the room you are in, let attention widen until it fills your own frame. You are not a single piece. You are an assembly of about 30 trillion human cells working in coordinated cycles, replacing themselves at different paces, deferring and advancing so the whole can feel like one thing. Red blood cells carry oxygen by the billions, streamlining through capillaries in quiet loops. Neurons send small waves of electricity and chemistry down long, thin axons, then pause, then send again. Muscle fibers slide past each other and hold, release, until posture or breath asks for a change. Skin softens at the surface and renews from beneath. The lining of your gut turns over steadily, matching the rhythm of meals. Immune cells read the world and write back in signals that direct help to where it is needed. Most of this happens with no request from you. It continues while you listen, while you sleep, while you turn from one side to the other in the small hour, and then settle. It might be tempting to imagine a conductor behind the motion, but the calm truth is more soothing. Local rules and near neighbors guide most of it. A cell notices that its partner has divided and waits its turn. A patch of tissue senses tension and adds fibers until the pull evens out. A cluster of immune cells sees a pattern and reacts, then quiets when the pattern is gone. The orchestra plays by watching the players beside it. The symphony emerges because each instrument knows when to hold and when to join. Your body is not a crowd. It is a practiced ensemble, a living habit of consent that has been kept since you were a cluster of cells too small to see. Nightfall Travels keeps returning to agreements for this reason. A flower and a bee meet in a vibration, and both do a little better. A fungus and an alga share shelter and sugar, and both hold a cliff where wind finds no purchase. A tardigrade carries a pause through years so it can resume its slow walk when water returns. A small mammal keeps a colony by keeping its cells in good order longer than most. And you, whether asleep or nearly so, host a city that acts like one person. The facts are gentle enough to carry you to rest. They do not need to be solved or even remembered. It is enough to know they are true somewhere just outside your window and somewhere just beneath your skin. Before we move on, let your breathing match the pace of these quiet works. Inhale with the pedal's soft vibration.
Exhale with nectar returning to its usual sweetness. Inhale with lichen drawing dew. Exhale with the first dust of soil letting a moss take hold. Inhale with a tardigrade waking its legs. Exhale with the tunnels of a colony settling for the night. Inhale with the sense of many cells beginning the tasks of repair. And exhale with the sense that nothing more is required of you than to lie still. We will continue from here as gently as we began. For now, let the room hold you the way stone holds lichen and soil holds a seed. The work proceeds while you rest.
Let your attention settle like dusk on a quiet room and listen for soft intelligence in feathers. Parrots wear their thinking lightly, but some have shown a clarity that feels close at hand. The African gray is famous for it. One bird, patiently taught, learned to label colors and shapes, to say same and different, even to point toward none when nothing matched. You can picture the scene without the apparatus: a bright eye, a head tilt, a brief pause, then a sound that stands in for a choice, as clean as a fingertip resting on the right card. In the wild, that clarity translates to the work of daily life, navigating shifting social groups, remembering fruiting trees across the season, teasing seeds from tough husks, and, at times, reshaping a twig into a tool that will simply do. The voice we hear is only a surface. Underneath it sits the quiet steadiness of a bird that notices, decides, and keeps to a plan without fuss. It's restful to think of intelligence as something that need not be loud to be real, a lantern trimmed low for long flights between trees. From branches and air, return to water, vast enough to hold more living mass than all dry ground combined. The ocean covers most of the planet, and within its layers life branches into forms too many to count. Near the sunlit surface, microscopic drifters, phytoplankton and their grazing partners, turn light into food and begin chains that rise toward krill, fishes, and whales. In the dimmer zones, soft bodies drift like lanterns. In the dark itself, eyes widen, jaws lengthen, and living lamps wink on. Even where no light penetrates, vents and seeps feed communities built on chemistry alone. Every drop of seawater is busy. Bacteria, viruses, larvae, diatoms, and tiny animals passing one another like night traffic on a road that circles the world. And always, from the surface downward, a slow snow of life falls. Detached scales, shed mucus, cast off shells, fragments of bodies and bacterial colonies, descending as a gentle, constant rain. Marine snow sinks through quiet water and feeds what waits below, a simple, generous link that ties sunlight to depth. You do not need the names to feel the pace of it. Imagine only a flake drifting in dark blue, turning once, turning again, until a mouth meets it and the journey ends.
On land, there is a forest that is one tree, and it moves not by steps, but by time. In a grove in the American West, quaking aspens stand in close ranks with white trunks and leaves that whisper in the least wind. Above ground, they look like many, but beneath the soil their roots join into a single organism that has been sending up new stems for longer than cities have existed. Pando is one name we've given it. Each trunk lives its own span, but the root mind persists, feeding young shoots from old sugars, opening new leaves where light reaches and letting shaded stems fall quiet. Picture an autumn gust passing through, thousands of leaves trembling at once, sunlight flickering like water across the forest floor. That shimmer is one body exhaling. Where fire or browsing trims a patch, the underground network answers with more chutes. Where clearings open, trunks rise in pale ranks as if a thought had been decided. The scale soothes because it is both immense and ordinary. No miracle is required to keep it going, only patient practice of what trees do. Pull water, spend light, share. Your own body carries a different kind of shared history, written into strands that copy and divide. Not all the genes you inherit speak only of human ancestors. A portion of your genome began as viral sequences that entered cells in the far past and settled into the germline, moving forward in the quiet way all inherited pieces do. Over ages, many have gone silent or been repurposed. A few were adapted for work that matters, such as helping tissues coordinate complex tasks. You can hold this gently without reaching for numbers. It means that some of the instructions you live by were once intrusions, and that the line between invader and helper is not fixed for all time. It also means that your cells carry an archive of old encounters, most of it dormant, most of it harmless, much of it folded into the routines that make a morning ordinary. The calmer truth sits just beneath the novelty. Life borrows, edits, and keeps what works.
Now let the sea return, not as a field of voices this time, but as a long line of motion older than leaves. Sharks glided through water long before the first forests cast shade on land. Their bodies reveal a design that has changed little because it fits its purpose well. A flexible skeleton of cartilage, skin set with tiny denticles that smooth the flow of water, and senses tuned to faint signs. Some species read weak electrical fields with organs along their snouts, feeling the small, steady currents that living tissue makes, a whisper in water that guides the final, unhurried turn toward the unseen. Others sense shifts in pressure with a lateral line that runs the length of the body, mapping motion in a way that feels like touch at a distance. You can imagine one moving just below a sunstripe on the surface, adjusting almost imperceptibly as cues add up, an economy of action refined by a calendar so long it makes years feel small. Their endurance is not an argument, it is a presence, like a slow tide that never leaves. Set these lives side by side, and the room gets quieter. A parrot sorting shapes and categories feels less like a performance and more like what minds do when given time. The ocean's invisible traffic of plankton and snow is less a spectacle than a steady market in which nothing is wasted for long. Pondo's trembling is simply a root remembering the sky, extending where it can, holding where it must. The viral threads in your genome are not a thread humming under your skin. They are lines in a long ledger of borrowings, most of them struck through or written over with uses more fitting to the body you carry. And the shark is not a symbol. It is an answer that has been true for ages to the question of how to move through water with care.
If you would like an easy way to breathe with them, let each image mark a quiet count. Inhale with the slight pause before an African gray answers, and exhale with the simple correctness of the choice. Inhale with the lift of a million diatoms rising toward morning light, and exhale with the slow fall of marine snow into the blue.
Inhale with a whole grove shimmering at once when wind touches it, and exhale with roots extending a fraction of an inch into cool soil. Inhale with the calm acceptance that your genome is a layered story, and exhale with the sense that most stories in you are already sleeping. Inhale with the slow arc of a shark crossing a reef edge at dusk, and exhale with the return to stillness behind it. Nightfall Travels keeps to this small, steady measure because the world does. Minds in feathers, cities in water, forests that are one, archives inside cells, bodies that read currents like maps. None of this asks to be rushed. You only need to notice, and then let the noticing drift to the edges of thought where it can keep you company without demanding your hands. Outside, there may be a breeze in a tree you cannot see, leaves moving in a pattern that someone else might mistake for 100 separate lives. Beneath that tree, soil is threaded with messages. Above it, air is written with faint lines no eye can read. Far away, a glow falls through dark water. Closer still, a small voice in a quiet room chooses the right shape and waits for the next gentle question. Breathe with all of it once more and rest where you are.
Return for a moment to the warm breath of the forest and let your thoughts rise with it. In the late morning, leaves loosen their grip on the night's water and release a slow exhale of vapor. The air above the canopy thickens until it knits itself into small clouds, drifting just high enough to throw a softer light back down. In many rainforests, this happens day after day, a quiet weather engine run by trees. Moisture drawn up by roots becomes mist, mist becomes cloud, and cloud becomes rain that finds its way back into the soil. The cycle doesn't hurry, it simply repeats, a pulse you can sense without seeing it, like a heartbeat felt through a sleeve. When you stand beneath tall trunks, you are standing inside a kind of sky-making. The leaves do not demand thanks. They offer what they have and take what returns, keeping the air gentle for everything that lives in their shade. Follow a small river from the forest out toward the sea and pause where the bottom turns to sand and shell. There, a crab moves in a way that almost looks like gardening. Decorator crabs wear their surroundings, lifting bits of seaweed, algae, and living sponges and hooking them onto the fine hairs that cover their shells and legs. Some choose pieces for texture. Some prefer materials that release unfriendly tastes. Others settle tiny sponges that keep growing as the crab grows, an outfit that renews itself with time. Watch long enough and you can see a method. The crab peels a surface, tests the fit, presses the piece into place, and then blends the edges with a few patient strokes. What looks like camouflage is also a soft kind of collaboration. Shelter for the crab, a traveling foothold for the sponge. In quiet water, disguise becomes a craft, practiced with care, thread by thread, until the moving shape is nearly indistinguishable from the small forest it walks through. Lift your gaze from a single shell to the greater company it keeps. Insects rule by presence more than by size. For every one of us, there are multitudes of them, spread from canopy to cave, from dune grass to tundra moss. Beetles, flies, moths, ants, dragonflies, wasps, Countless forms carrying out simple work that adds up to everything. Pollination that sets fruit, decomposition that returns what falls, soil turning that keeps roots breathing, and meals for birds, bats, and countless others. Many live brief lives measured in warm weeks. Others sleep through seasons and wake into one specific hour they were made for. If you sit still at the edge of a meadow, you can feel their industry as a kind of hum that belongs to the place. They build no great monuments and lead no parades. They keep the world's small promises. This flower visited, this leaf softened, this grain of soil moved a finger's width, this nest fed. In their numbers, the planet finds stability. In their nearness, it finds motion. From the meadow, slip into the deep green of a New Guinea forest and stop where a patch of ground has been swept clean. A bird of paradise has prepared a stage, clearing twigs and leaves until only the right floor remains. He arrives bright and definite, feathers arranged in ways that look improbable until you see how perfectly they hold. There is choreography here, a sequence of hops and bows and turns, a fan unfurled, a shimmer that changes with the angle, a quiet sound that marks a transition, then a freeze. Above, a female watches from a branch, taking in the precision and the patience. Each species has its steps, each region its variations. The dance is not waste. It is a test of attention and health, of timing and condition. The forest is a theater for a while, then returns to being only leaves and light. The cleared stage will be messy again by morning. Another day will be made tidy. The rhythm continues because the rhythm works.
Walk from the stage to the corner of a fence where a web draws lines across air. Spiders spin from their own bodies a thread that feels so light you might forget you are touching it. Yet measured against its weight, silk is astonishingly strong and forgiving. Different silks serve different roles. A dragline that can catch a fall and hold. A sticky thread that slows a flying body without snapping. A soft wrapping that cradles eggs against the weather. A line that marks a path home in darkness. In dew, an orb web shows its geometry, radiating spokes and a spiral that steps inward, a design that is both elegant and inevitable. The spider moves with easy certainty along strands that do not cling to its feet, pausing to test a tremble here or there. The material is made fresh each day, and often eaten again at night to save its building blocks. Nothing is hoarded, everything is returned to the small factory that makes new lines by dawn. As the light fades, stay outdoors. On warm nights, the dark fields speak with flickers. Fireflies lift and settle, each flash a measured note in a conversation carried without sound. Males fly and display patterns their kind will understand. Females answer from grass or branch with a timing that matches the code. Different species write different rhythms, and in some valleys, entire stands of trees seem to breathe in unison as thousands of lights pulse together. The chemistry is tidy, oxygen meeting a light-making molecule with the help of an enzyme. Heat absent, message sent. To us, the show is simple beauty. To the insects, it is a necessary clarity that fills a short window in the year. The language is not for us, and yet some part of it crosses the gap because timing and pattern are things we all feel. You can watch without thinking, and the watchfulness will be enough.
The idea of using what grows nearby to stay well is not ours alone. In forests on 2 continents, primates have been seen seeking plants they ordinarily ignore, chewing bitter piths, swallowing rough leaves whole like folded paper, or rubbing certain pastes onto their skin. The choices tend to arrive with symptoms: stomach discomfort, parasites, a wound. The leaves' rough surfaces can help sweep a gut. The pith's chemicals can crowd out what does not belong. The pastes can keep a bite from going wrong. None of this looks like ceremony. It looks like a memory kept in a body and handed along by watching. Youths taste what adults taste when trouble visits and learn the same small remedies. A woodland pharmacy stocked by seasons and by need. The quietness of it is the point. There is no sudden cure, only help enough for the day, and that is often what the day requires. When you set these scenes next to one another, they fit like smooth stones. A rainforest lifts water until cloud returns it. A crab wears its world until it disappears into it. A billion small bodies keep soil breathing and fruit setting. A bird cleans a stage and chooses a partner by the steadiness of a dance. A spider turns protein into lines that hold and then makes those lines new. A summer field writes messages in light to tie one life to another. A monkey tastes what it would rather avoid and finds that wellness sometimes arrives by way of bitterness. None of this is dramatic. All of it is true and ongoing.
If you'd like a way to breathe with these, let each image mark a simple count. Inhale with the forest's vapor rising from leaves in sunlight. Exhale with a soft, brief rain falling back through green. Inhale with the crab lifting a sponge and testing its edge. Exhale with the final smoothing stroke that completes the disguise. Inhale with the meadow hum you can almost hear in your chest. Exhale with the thought of a single petal dusted with pollen. Inhale with the first step of a dance on a cleared stage. Exhale with the held stillness that follows it. Inhale with the spider leaning into a new span. Exhale with dew beating on a spiral that will be gone by morning. Inhale with a dozen lights starting together in a dark tree. Exhale with the pause before the next wave. Inhale with the bitter taste that helps. Exhale with the quiet return to ordinary food. Nightfall Travels moves at this measured pace because it matches the work of the world. The forest does not rush its clouds. The crab does not rush its camouflage. The insects do not rush the tasks that keep everything else upright. The dancer does not rush the step that will be remembered. The spider does not rush a single line. The firefly does not rush its brief lamp. The primate does not rush the lesson a plant can teach. You do not need to rush either. Let these simple, patient lives set your rhythm, and let that rhythm be enough for the night.
Begin again with breath and water. Out on the open sea, light falls in flecks, and tiny drifters lean toward it. Phytoplankton, small as dust and countless as the afternoon glitter on waves, use sunlight to knit carbon into simple sugars and release oxygen as they work. Each one is a speck. Together, they help fill the air you're breathing now.
You won't see their faces, only the calm result. The ocean quietly adding its share to the planet's easy inhale. It is comforting to know that far from shore, in places without voices or paths, a soft factory runs without pause, taking care of strangers it will never meet. On land, a dark bird tilts its head toward a small problem it answers with plain tools. Crows have a habit of choosing the later good over the quick sweet, storing food for leaner hours, saving a hook-shaped twig or bending wire into a better shape if that is what the day asks. They stand at the edge of our streets and watch, filing away what helps and what does not. When they hide a piece of food, they will sometimes move it later if they notice another eye nearby. The planning looks simple because it is clean. Do a little work now to make the next hour easier. You can rest with the thought that clear decisions do not need ceremony. They can be as ordinary as turning a twig in the beak until it fits the gap. Toward evening, the ground cools and the heat of living bodies becomes its own signal. Pit vipers, boas, and pythons carry small cavities near their faces that sense infrared radiation, the warmth that flows off fur, feather, and skin. To such an eye, a mouse in shadow is a soft ember, and a cold rock is only a rock. The picture isn't a photograph. It is a map of warm against cool, a guide that keeps an animal true in dark grass or leaf litter. The world is full of senses we don't share. This one is quiet enough to imagine without envy. It is simply another way to notice what is already there.
Now let the view widen to a country of low plants and wide sky that sleeps most of the year. The Arctic tundra waits under frost and night until the sun returns for long hours and the top of the soil softens. In a few days, there is color everywhere, flowers tight to the ground, mosses and grasses throwing their brief green into the light. Pollinators sweep in, birds nest in sudden crowds, and small animals hurry a year's business into a short window. The burst is quick and decisive. Then the world slows again, content to wait. It can be restful to think of seasons that truly keep their boundaries, that ask for speed only when speed is useful, then return to a long, even pace. Under a gentler sea, something unspools and spools again. A sea cucumber's body can turn from firm to pliant in a few breaths by rearranging the links in its connective tissue. When a tight crevice offers safety, it softens and flows like thick water. When it needs to brace, it stiffens and holds. A few relatives will even release parts of their insides to distract a predator, then rebuild what was lost. In the same cold reaches where ice forms in seawater, an icefish keeps its blood from freezing with special proteins that cling to tiny crystals and stop them from growing. The fish moves slowly, with no hurry in the fin strokes, pale-blooded and untroubled by cold that would lock other bodies still. Somewhere between equator and pole, termites raise towers of soil that breathe on their own. Vents and chambers conduct air in currents that keep the nest's temperature and gases steady, even while outside heat swings from edge to edge. It is a city tuned to comfort by nothing louder than the difference between warm and cool. On dry ground, a small lizard faces a larger mouth and answers with a brief, startling trick. The horned lizard can increase pressure in tiny vessels near its eyes until a thin stream of blood jets outward.
The taste is enough to send many would-be attackers away. The body repairs the rupture without fuss and carries on. If that image feels sharp, soften it with one from deep water and deeper time. At the volcanic vents, hot, mineral-rich water pours into dark ocean, and microbes feed on chemicals instead of light. Around them gather tube worms and clams, white crabs and eels, building a community where day never reaches. Some think life's earliest steps began in such places, cells using gradients of energy across stone and water, the way a battery uses charge. It is a quiet possibility to hold at arm's length, that beginnings prefer edges, where one condition meets another and everything is slightly out of balance.
Shallow water offers a calmer repair. A starfish that loses an arm can grow it back over weeks or months. In some species, a single arm with a slice of the central disc can rebuild the rest. No drama, only a slow restating of a body plan already written in the tissues. In creeks and coves far to the south, an animal that seems made of spare parts keeps a different set of rules. The platypus lays eggs, seeps milk through skin for its young, carries venomous spurs on the hind legs of males, and hunts with eyes and ears closed, feeling the faint electrical twitch of muscles in its prey through receptors in its bill. None of this asks to be reconciled. It only asks to be accepted as a tidy fit for a quiet stream. When the light drops, wings take over. Bats lifting to the air and write maps with sound, sending high calls and reading the world from the echoes. A moth, a branch, an opening between leaves, each returns a tiny report in timing and texture. The bat hears, adjusts, and continues. It is not hearing as we know it. It is a sense that builds a room around the flyer as fast as the next pulse goes out. On coasts where stones clink under ice-blue sky, some penguins court by offering a pebble, one small present at the beginning of a shared task. A good stone lifts eggs from melting snow and keeps a nest dry. The gesture is enough. A bow, a placement, a life begun with the simplest materials at hand. Over the open ocean, where rest is rare, certain birds close half their brain at a time while they glide, one eye staying open to the world, one side of the mind staying on watch. They dream in a fraction and keep their line through the wind. In your own head, small spikes of electricity leap between neurons even now, tiny storms whose patterns become memory and feeling. None of it clicks or sparks in the way wires do. It is chemistry moving across distance and back again, a hum that never quite stops. In a shallow sea, a cuttlefish smooths itself into stone by changing not only color, but texture, raising little peaks in its skin or letting them fall flat until edge and body agree. Under moonlit water, an entire reef listens to lunar timing, and on a night set by phase and temperature, releases eggs and sperm in a shared, brief fog. The sea holds the snow of new lives for a while. Currents take care of the rest.
A frog swallows and blinks a slow, pushing blink. Its eyes press downward to help move food along. In a field, a plant chewed by a caterpillar gives off a faint perfume of alarm, and nearby leaves change their chemistry in answer, tasting worse to the same mouth a short time later. It is not a panic. It is a neighborhood watch in molecules and breeze. If some of these scenes feel like a swift procession, let them pass like the last pages of a book before sleep. Single, clear images meant only to be placed gently. The measure that links them is plain. A vast share of your oxygen comes from lives too small to see. A crow saves a shape it can use later. A snake reads warmth. A plane spreads flowers once and then rests. A sea body melts and firms. A fish carries ice-proof blood. Insects build air-conditioned hills from soil. A lizard startles the world with a brief ribbon of red. Vents feed communities on chemistry alone. An arm returns. A bill feels electricity. A wing reads echoes. A pebble begins a nest. A bird sleeps in halves. A brain whispers in sparks. A skin becomes rock. A moon sets a tide of seeds in water. An eye helps a swallow. A leaf warns a leaf. None of it needs your help to continue. You're only asked to notice and then to lay the noticing down. Here at Nightfall Travels, we stay with that ease. Breathe once for the sea's quiet factories, once for the patient tool in a dark bird's beak, once for a warm outline in shadow, once for a plane that blooms all at once for the body that flows, the blood that will not freeze, the tower that breathes, the small defense that surprises and is gone, once for beginnings in hot darkness, for the arm returned, for the bill that reads currents in muscle, for the wing that knows a room by sound, for the stone that starts a home, for the half-sleep that keeps a line, for the gentle sparks under bone, for the coat that becomes the ground, for the reef that follows the moon, for the blink that pushes, and for the leaf that speaks on the air. Let the room get softer around each breath. Let the facts keep doing what they do while you let go.
Return to the forest, where one being wears many faces. A clonal grove of quaking aspens lifts 1,000 thin trunks into the same breeze, leaves trembling like coins laid edge to edge. Each stem lives its own span, but the root below is one patient creature, sending up new shoots where light permits and letting shaded ones fade. Longevity here is not a single tall tree against the sky. It is a quiet continuity underfoot, a mind made of roots remembering where water lingers and where fire once passed. If the surface changes, the whole remembers. It is a gentle way to think about endurance, not a monument, but a habit. Beneath such groves and gardens, other keepers work without fuss. Earthworms loosen soil with simple motion, drawing leaves into the dark, digesting them, and returning the ground in fine, rich castings. Their tunnels carry air and water to roots, their bodies stitched the layers together, and each night's small routes add up to better days for stems and seeds. Charles Darwin admired them for a reason that suits the hour. They are ordinary and irreplaceable at once. On the open plain, tall bodies rest in fractions. Giraffes sleep in brief spells, half an hour here, a few minutes there, often standing, sometimes folding themselves with a neat bend of the long neck. While one half dozes, another lifts its head and watches. The vigilance is quiet, an economy of rest that fits an open horizon. The lesson is not to sleep less, but to imagine that sleep can arrive in many shapes, all of them tuned to a life. Where we leave long-lived things in a hurry, others are learning to meet the mess. Certain microbes nibble at plastics we thought would last too long. They do not hurry either. Enzymes find seams in the synthetic, loosening what we pressed tight.
and in doing so, they sketch a path we might help along without expecting miracles. In the far north, an animal answers the year with color. The Arctic fox turns winter white to vanish in glare and shifts to brown or gray as stones and sedges return. The change is not decoration. It is a coat reading its backdrop, a body remembering the month with pigment.
Deeper than sunlight, life still writes in vivid shapes. In the deep sea, pressure reshapes familiar plans into lantern-bearing fish, transparent drifters, slow arms and running legs that look like sketches of machines. You can let that parade pass without names and only keep the rhythm. Slow, patient, improbable, thriving where dawn never reaches. Back on coasts and fields, birds do with beaks what hands would do with fingers. Crows save tools, New Caledonian crows shape twigs into hooks, green herons drop bait for fish, and woodpecker finches pinch grubs with a splinter. Tool use isn't a line that separates us and them. It is a bridge many have crossed for a task or a season. In deserts, an old partner of people moves with few needs. Camels carry days between drinks, draw water from fat when they must, and let their body temperature swing to spare sweat. Wide feet spread weight, long lashes sift grit, blood cells keep their shape through drought. There is no miracle here, only a design that learned the rules of heat and distance and keeps them. Inside thin shells, voices start before a beak ever shows. Chicks chirp from the egg, a murmur of breathing and rhythm that mothers answer with small, steady sounds. Siblings hear each other and sometimes align their first cracks, a gentle coordination before sight. Cold turns some small bodies to glass and then back to silk. Insects of hard winters fill themselves with cryoprotectants and survive as crystals grow around them. When the thaw reaches them, they rise and resume the short business they were meant for. At the other pole, a bear that looks white wears black skin under hollow hairs that scatter light and carry it inward. The trick is simple and sufficient. Reflect to blend, absorb to warm.
In the surf again, soft bells break and begin anew. Many jellyfish can clone themselves in early forms. Fragments become multiples. Life answers damage with division. In your own case, a subtler glow goes unnoticed. Human skin emits a faint light too dim for our eyes, a byproduct of chemistry at rest and in motion, peaking and fading with the day. You are not a lantern in the meadow. You are a hush of light under the skin, always there, always small. Where shore meets mud, the line between walking and swimming blurs. Mud skippers press pectoral fins into steps, climb roots, and breathe through damp skin and mouth lining. Climbing perch travel short distances on wet grass to new water. Eels take damp nights to move between creeks. These are not legends, only small edits to the boundary between tides. When water itself turns against the colony, other edits appear. Fire ants link legs and mandibles into rafts, trapping bubbles and the air in their hair, carrying queens and brood across brown water for days. No one commands the weave. The rules are local. The structure holds. Take a drop of ocean and hold it to the light. Within it, a galaxy of small lives turns. Algae coin and spin. Larvae paddle. Bacteria bloom and sleep. Viruses pass notes the eye cannot read. There is more world in a pinch than in a map, and its business is constant. Where water boils and acid steam, life still writes its name.
In bright pools that smell of stone and fire, microbes run on chemistries that would ruin us, thriving at pH that bites. At night in a garden, another quiet arithmetic keeps the lights on. Plants divide stored sugar by hours to dawn and spend just enough to last. A budget kept without a brain, proof that planning belongs to molecules too. In the dark above fields, an owl takes the air without a sound. Feathers break up turbulence and hush the rush, and the owl's ear finds the vole under snow by faint sliding noise. Silence here is a tool. In a small dish or a shallow stream, a flatworm cut to pieces grows a map of itself from almost any part, tissues returning to a whole like a song finding its melody after a pause. In cities, a bird you barely notice watches you closely. Pigeons remember faces, sorting friend from stranger long after clothes change. Proof that memory thrives in ordinary lives.
Inside your cells, old visitors live on as text. Ancient viral fragments sit in the genome as quiet notes, some repurposed for work we need, most sleeping like pressed flowers in a book. Under pines and firs in Oregon, another network claims size by spreading in the dark. An armillaria fungus runs for acres, threads sinking into wood, feeding, sending up mushrooms as rare punctuation marks in a long sentence written underground. In summer fields, bees learn by watching, rolling a small ball to a goal when one of their own has showed the trick, then improving it by a shorter push. In water, many fishes rest one hemisphere at a time, keeping station on a current, while half the brain keeps watch and half slips into stillness. In trees and hedges, a chameleon shifts mood and message through structural color, bright when it must declare, softer when it must blend, crystals tilting in the skin like shutters moved by quiet hands. High above and far below, the planet's magnetic field runs like invisible thread through water and stone, a line felt by turtle, whale, warbler, and robin. A route written without ink that many can read without effort. All of it returns to a simple cadence. Life begins again where it can. In roots that remember, in tunnels that breathe, in deserts, in frost, in warm bells of jelly, in rafts, in drops, in boiling pools, in feathers that refuse noise, in cuts that heal to wholeness, in faces remembered, in genomes annotated by the past, in mats that spread for acres, in minds that learn by watching, in brains that sleep in halves, in skins that speak with light, in inner compasses that do not waver. You do not need to thread the whole story. Let a few images remain and let the rest turn to comfortable blur. Nightfall travels will keep the pace for you, slow, steady, factual, and kind. Somewhere now, a fox's coat is turning with the month, an owl is moving like a shadow with wings, a plant is counting the hours, and a single root in a quiet grove is deciding where to send its next pale stem. You are part of the same practice of continuance. Take one more slow breath. Let it go. The world will keep, and so will you.